The first mandatory marriage counseling session as part of the divorce process was scheduled for this week. Marvin knew it would be a waste of time because Cheryl was so adamant about her desire for women's freedom that she was unwilling to compromise in any way. Marvin had his first session alone with the counselor, Diane Marco. After exchanging pleasantries, Diane asked, "Marvin, do you love your wife?" He replied, "Absolutely." She asked, "Do you think Cheryl loves you?" "She says she does," replied Marvin. "Then why are you getting a divorce?" the counselor asked. He replied, "She left home with all her stuff. She told me not to contact her for 6 months. She stated that she wants to act like she is single again and have relationships with other men. To me, that seems to indicate that she doesn't want to be married to me. That's why I filed the application." "How do you feel, Marvin?" Looking directly into Diana's eyes, he snapped back, "What a stupid question. How do you think I'm feeling? If you're trying to find out if I'm violent, I can tell you that I love her and would never physically harm her. She's a good person. I think she's confused about who she is and what she wants to be." With growing irritation, he continued, "Trouble is, she's running right into a minefield, throwing rose petals around, thinking this escapade will have a happy ending. I hope you manage to reconcile us, but I'll move on while she drowns herself in introspection." Diana asked, "Since you filed for divorce right after Valentine's Day, can you tell me about that day?" He replied, "I bought 24 red roses, treated her to her favorite chocolates, and had dinner and drinks for $200 at an expensive restaurant that's hard to get into. She gave me a card. It had a very sweet statement in it, but it was their words, not hers. She signed it, Love C. We got into bed and I got a kiss that lasted a nanosecond, and then she turned her back to me and said, 'Good night.' Thinking about it now, I realize I lost her somewhere along the way. I understand why she wants to leave, as she is not excited about our future, so I will be more firm about finalizing the divorce if she feels that way." Diane thought, "Great. I should be trying to bring these people together, not tear them apart. My job just got harder." Week 7. Cheryl came to Diane Marco's office for a reconciliation meeting. Diane asked the same questions in the same order that she had asked Marvin. She got the same answers from her as Marvin did, up to the question about the reasons for the divorce. Cheryl replied, "I don't want a divorce. I told Marvin that I would go back to him in 6 months and resume our life together. I just want to feel free, because when I was younger, I didn't have the opportunity to do what I want to do. I'm not getting younger or prettier. All my friends have interesting experiences and I don't. Is that so unreasonable?" Miss Marco asked the same question about Valentine's Day. "Nothing special, like everyone else's, I guess. A few flowers and dinner. Nothing special," Cheryl replied. Diane then said, "Cheryl, Marvin said he only wants a divorce if you do things with other men. He loves you and wants to spend the rest of his life with you. Can you give up this idea of having relationships with other men to save your marriage?" She replied, "I don't understand why he is so demanding. I plan to go back to him in 6 months. He will like the new, more experienced version of me. We can go back to being the loving couple we've always been." Week 8. Marvin was on the junior college alumni board and made some projections for a possible fundraiser that he needed to present at the next board meeting. He called and set up a meeting with Tara Wilson, executive director of the Alumni Association. He could have emailed the projections to Tara, but she was too beautiful to stay on the other end of the email. He was greeted in her office with a radiant smile and a happy voice. She said, "I'm glad to see you again, and that you've come because I wanted to discuss some of these issues with you." After a lively discussion of the forecasts, Tara said, "I don't mean to pry, but I heard that you are divorcing Cheryl. I understand your situation, as I was there 2 years ago, and I still get hurt when certain things trigger my thoughts. Do you two still talk?" "No," he said. "We parted amicably, but she doesn't want to communicate while she goes through this introspection of herself and her life. There was no adultery or alcohol problems on either side. We were just going in different directions. She asked, I know this may be awkward for you, but I have a problem that you might be able to help me with. There is a formal charity dinner this Saturday night that I have to attend. I bought 2 tickets thinking my boyfriend would go with me, but now he's out of the picture. My problem is Patrick O'Kelly. I find him offensive, rude, and he wants to have fun with me. If he sees an empty seat next to me, he will sit down and ruin my evening. I can't tell him to screw off because he's a very generous sponsor of the junior college. You're the only person in this town who has enough presence to keep him away from me. Could you help me with that problem by becoming my beau? If you'd rather not, I completely understand you, given your current situation. He said, It would be my pleasure to dine with you and keep you away from O'Kelly's handyman. Just tell me your address and time and I'll come over. I suppose I should wear a tuxedo? Tara took his hand, but not for a handshake, but as a friend, and said, Thank you very much. The canceled trip to Paris still haunted Cheryl. She thought, Marvin can be so romantic sometimes. I wish he would be more considerate of what I want to do. She'd made a connection with the guy at Starbucks, and they'd gone out to lunch a few times. It was obvious to Cheryl that this relationship wasn't going to progress without sex. She decided it was too soon to hit the infidelity button. On Saturday evening, Marvin pulled up to Tara's house in a freshly washed BMW and a well-fitting tuxedo. After ringing the doorbell, the young man opened the door and politely said, Please come in, Mr. Johnson. My mother will be here shortly. He replied with a smile, Thank you. It was your mom who gave you the script to read to me. Grinning, the young man replied, Yes. While they were laughing at each other, the most beautiful woman walked into the room. This was not the Tara he had worked with on junior college-related projects. She was wearing a cobalt blue dress with narrow shoulder straps. He hesitated. Tara? I didn't recognize you. You're absolutely stunning. She replied, Yes, you know how to flatter a girl, don't you? With those words, he said, Let's get you into my car as soon as possible. I'm afraid some movie star is going to come along and take my beautiful companion away from me. She turned to her son and said, Sean, behave yourself, no visitors, go to bed by 10 p.m. Okay? Her son nodded, smiled at her and said, You look good, Mom. Everyone in town showed up for the evening event. Heads turned as Tara and Marvin entered the hall and made their way to the reserved table in front. Marvin knew that the men who approached their table were not here to talk to him. He had played golf with them that morning. Nothing new had happened, except that he had become the escort of the most beautiful woman in the building. Marvin had also become the target of several divorced women who had learned of the Johnsons' filing for divorce. He worked the hall, examining his current and potential clients. All the while, he watched Tara chatting with him, keeping his eyes on Handy O'Kelly. Suddenly, he saw Handy heading toward Tara like a cruise missile. He quickly turned his attention away from the conversation and headed toward Tara. Just as Handy started to hug Tara, Marvin slipped between them. He put his arm around Handy and said with a wide smile, Are you trying to steal my date, Patrick? You won't be the first or the last to try that. Tara played her part by gently placing her hand on Marvin's shoulder and said to Handy, Yes, I pulled off a big score when I talked Marvin into accompanying me. He wouldn't have come here tonight if I hadn't promised to dance all the dances with him. He knows how to negotiate, doesn't he? With those words, Handy said, Have a nice evening, and left. Tara whispered in his ear, I owe you a great debt. In response, he said, Being here with you is more than enough payment for me. Shall we sit down and eat? Their table of 8 was the busiest at the event, as Marvin was in his element, telling stories, joking, and laughing. It was the most enjoyable time he'd had since Cheryl left their home and possibly their marriage. When the orchestra played the first song, he motioned for Tara to join him on the dance floor. She grinned and gave him a hand, rising from her seat. They danced a few fast songs, and when the slow song started, they began to move together. Tara looked at him and said, I know and understand. I was there 2 years ago, but my world has changed. And changed for the better. I had friends who helped me through the challenges. Can I be one of your friends who can help you recover? He touched his head to her head and nodded in agreement since he couldn't speak. The rest of the evening was spent dancing, laughing, and having a good time. When the party ended at 11 p.m., she asked Marvin if he would take her for a ride in the convertible with the top down. She wanted the fresh, cool air to run through her hair and cool her down so she could put her arms around Marvin and warm her body and heart. She asked him to walk her to the door, to which he readily agreed. Marvin grinned and said, I haven't had this much fun in a long time. I can't figure out if it was because of you or because of my 200 friends who were around us. To find out what it was, can I take you out to dinner sometime next week? It's cheaper than paying for a dinner for 200 people. She laughed and said, I don't know anyone who can make me laugh with such a simple thing as asking me out on a date. For that reason, I agree. Let's go out Friday night. She hugged him longer than he expected and pulled away and gave him a quick kiss. Then went inside. Marvin put the roof down and drove home. There was warmth in his heart. Cheryl went with her friend Patty to one of the clubs to have some fun. Patty had been divorced for several years and understood what partying was all about. She knew Cheryl was pretty and fresh enough to attract a few guys to their table that night. And she was right. As they walked in, several guys took notice, walked over and asked Patty who her friend was. After introductions, Tim, Dan, and Harvey bought the girls' drinks, promising that the dancing would start soon. Tim and Cheryl took the stage to a few fast songs. When a slow song came on, Cheryl wasn't sure if physical contact was necessary during the slow song. Tim knew what to do. It had been years since other men had been this close. She reminded herself that this was the kind of socializing she was looking forward to, socializing with unknown men with unknown goals. Over the course of the evening, she had gotten the names and numbers of several men who wanted to go out with her. This made her feminine ego purr. I am still desirable to men. I can choose who I want to be with. Late that night, both she and Patty went home without men. Week 9. On Wednesday, several of Cheryl's office staff came to her with the morning edition of the junior college's internal media. The article about Tara Wilson being instrumental in the success of the children's charity event on Saturday night was the lead article. The article had several pictures of Tara and her unnamed companion. Very timidly, they wondered if that was her now separated husband next to the extremely attractive Tara Wilson, and if he was dancing with her. Dazed, Cheryl stared at the picture of her husband while the other women waited for her answer. She muttered, Yes, that's him. On Thursday, Cheryl stopped by Betty's travel agency and asked for a big favor. I really need to talk to Marvin. Could you call him and ask him to talk to me? I'm not lonely. I'm not sad. It's just that my kids don't want to talk to me, and maybe he can get the kids to contact me. Betty said, I won't interfere with your relationship. I will call Marvin and ask him if he will talk to you. If he says yes, I'll give you the phone and go next door. If not, I'll thank him and hang up. Any questions? Cheryl replied, No questions, and thank you for doing this for me. Betty called Marvin and asked if he wanted to talk to Cheryl, and he replied, Not really, but maybe I should. You can put her on the phone, and I'm sorry you're in a tight spot, Betty. Picking up the phone, Cheryl said, Good morning, Marvin. I hope you are having a good day. He replied, Yes. What do you want, Cheryl? She asked, Can we meet and talk? I really need to talk to you. It's hard to talk on the phone with Betty. Please, can we meet for a few minutes? He replied, Then we'll break one of your ironclad rules for your convenience. I can't contact you, but you can contact me. This is all because you changed the rules I thought we were supposed to live by, isn't it? She said, Please, Marvin. Reluctantly, he said, Okay, out to lunch today. Someplace we don't normally go so people won't think we're getting together. She replied, I can make you lunch at my house. Absolutely not. I don't want to enter your sanctuary of experiences. Alberto's restaurant is just off the freeway. I'll be there at noon. Anything else? Thank you very much, Marvin, she said as he hung up. As they pulled up to Alberto's, Marvin saw Cheryl in a corner booth. As he approached the booth, she got up, opened her arms, and hugged him. It was awkward. He just stood there with his arms at his sides while she hugged him. She started the conversation on what she thought was a light note. You look very trim. Cooking should do you good. He replied dryly, It's not my cooking. It seems like every other night some woman brings me food and asks me how I'm doing. One night they lined up 3 people at a time to bring me a home-cooked meal. The local women are very good at feeding me and taking care of me. That made Cheryl angry, and she asked, Was that whore Mary DeFalco one of those ladies? She always looked up to you when she was around us. Grinning, he replied, Yes, she was one of the first to stop by, and I must say she makes the best lasagna I've ever tasted. You're welcome to have her over anytime. She gritted her teeth and moved on to the next topic. Marvin, I know I've disappointed the kids, and they don't understand what I'm trying to do. But I miss talking to them. None of them have talked to me in weeks. Did you tell them not to communicate with me? When they were here, I told them that you were still their mother and they should treat you with respect, he replied. She quickly asked, They came to see you, not me. It breaks my heart. He snapped back. Yes, it seems to happen a lot. Then he stared at her for a moment. Cheryl stared at the table. Then he said, I'll call them this week and have them call you. I won't make them call you, I'll ask them to call you. Speaking of call you, you may take offense to some of the names they'll call you. So be prepared. Now Cheryl had 3 for 3 negative responses she didn't want to receive, so she moved on to the next topic. I saw your picture in the paper with Tara Wilson. Are you 2 dating? He replied, She didn't have a date to the charity dinner, so she asked me to be her date. I haven't had that much fun in a long time. She's a very pretty lady. She asked you? She asked. Yes, it's hard to believe that a beautiful, talented, intelligent girl asked me out. Isn't it? He said, looking her straight in the eye. Even though he was looking her in the eye, he felt a strong gulp escape from her throat. Marvin, I haven't budgeted for a lot of items and I'm short on funds. I know how you've always made sure I pay my bills, that I have a good credit history, and I want to keep that rating. But with utilities, new health insurance, an apartment deposit, and moving and storage costs, I'm in a tight spot. Can I borrow $2,000 from you? I'll pay you back, I promise. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her with frustration and annoyance. Slowly, he pulled out his checkbook, wrote her a check, and held it out across the table. She said, Thank you very much. I'm embarrassed to ask you to do this. I had planned to become a more independent woman, but it hasn't happened yet. Are we done? He asked. One last question, Cheryl replied. Can you tell me about the trip to France that Betty and Cindy told me you organized? Marvin sighed again. What's there to tell? I planned the trip for us so you could go to France. I knew it was something you had always wanted to do. I had the papers with me the night you told me you were leaving me. I canceled the trip since it looks like you are no longer in my life. Trying to hold back tears, Cheryl said, This is the most selfless and wonderful thing a man has ever done for me. You are truly a wonderful and considerate husband, and I love you for that. Please remember that I am not leaving you. When we are together again, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Are we done? He asked. When Cheryl nodded, Marvin got up, paid the bill, and left. Later that afternoon, Marvin called Tara to ask if she would agree to go out with him on Friday night. Tara replied, Yes, I'm on the calendar and I'm looking forward to it. What do you have in mind for the evening? He replied, Since your junior college baseball games are Friday night and the forecast says it will be a perfect spring evening, I thought it would be nice to go to the game, eat some food in the park, and watch the games. How's that for an idea? She replied, How fun! That's a great idea. Do you want me to take 2 seats for us in the faculty box? He replied, No, because then it would be like a job for you. I'll pick you up at 4 p.m. and we'll get seats when we get there. Great, see you then. Marvin got some good seats on the third base side of the field. The first thing they got was a soda and popcorn. As they started on the popcorn, Marvin asked, I took a chance asking you about the baseball game tonight. I didn't know if you liked outdoor activities or sports. Tara replied, I love all sports, played softball in high school and a little in college. Tonight is the perfect night for it. I've been here for 2 years and have never been to a game. Thanks for thinking about it. He asked, Is your son into sports as well? He plays sports but is now considering golf, but the logistics and transportation are complicated by my job. Marvin thought for a few seconds and said, Our country club has a program for young golfers this summer, and it's great. 5 hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday each week from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The first hour is golf instruction, the second hour is playing 3, 4 holes, and at noon they get hot dogs and hamburgers. After lunch, they go to the pool until their parents come to get them. My goodness, that would be perfect for him. But how much does it cost? Tara asked. He replied, The only cost is his food. The club plans to make it so much fun for the kids that they'll talk their parents into joining the country club. You don't have to be a member now. I will sponsor you until you decide if you want to join. If you're interested, I'll give you the information. Tara brightened and said, That would be great. Thank you for thinking of him and me. The rest of the afternoon and evening was spent watching 2 fun baseball games and eating hot popcorn. They laughed and talked like 2 high school kids getting to know each other. Gradually, Marvin realized that he had brought a blanket with him. Not so much to keep warm, but to have an excuse to snuggle up to Tara. She didn't seem to mind. The evening ended with a hug, a brief kiss, and a promise to meet up the following week. Week 10. On Sunday, the golf course at the country club was closed for the first golf tournament of the spring. It was to be a scramble format, where each member takes a shot and the team chooses the best of 4 strokes. The golf pro forms teams using handicaps to determine the A, B, C, and D players. Marvin was a B player and was very surprised to see Greta Gustafsson as an A player. Greta has been playing on the LPGA Tour for about 10 years. During those 10 years, she was one of the most photographed players on the tour. Not for winning events, but for the way she looked. 5 inches tall, long blonde hair, an hourglass figure that could be shown off in shorts and tight golf shirts. She was a native of Sweden, and her voice was soft and sing-songy. She used her winnings and money from sponsors to buy and expand the largest insurance agency in town. After introductions, the 4 players got into their carts and headed for the first hole. Marvin was excited to see that Greta was traveling with him. He told her, We haven't met before, but I've seen you here many times. Greta replied, I know who you are because you gave the president's report at the annual meetings. It's nice to meet you. Player D hit first, followed by players C, B, and finally A. When Greta bent over and stuck her club into the ground, it was clear why she was so beloved on tour. That ass was the most beautiful ass Marvin had ever seen. Turning her torso, her long arms swung sharply, creating a powerful shot. The ball flew 250 yards down the center of the fairway with a shriek. Greta smiled, tucking the club back into her bag. As she was getting into the cart, Marvin said, Det var mycket bra. That was very good, in Swedish. At these words, Greta raised her head fearfully. Greta replied, Du talar svenska? Do you speak Swedish? He smiled and replied, Ja, yes, in Swedish, and then said in English, That's about as far as my Swedish goes. Both of my parents' families were Swedish immigrants in 1868, hence the last name Johnson. Smiling beautifully, she said, I'm looking forward to our game tonight. You're the first person I've met in this town who knows anything about Sweden. The remaining 17 holes became a stage for laughter, jokes, and discussion of Swedish customs. Their laughter could be heard as they sang Swedish nursery rhymes. Marvin knew the words his grandmother taught him, but didn't know their meanings, which made them even funnier. Thanks to Greta's long shots and Marvin's strokes, the foursome collected the first prize of $100 per person in shirts, pants, and golf equipment. Greta turned to Marvin and said, "Playing golf with you was more fun than winning. We should do it again." Smiling, he agreed and said, "Sure. How about you come over here Wednesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? I'll buy you dinner then. It will be cheaper for me than paying you at $1 a stroke difference in our results." Weeks 11 and 12. Cheryl initially told her sorority sisters that she would not be attending their 25th graduation anniversary. After threats of kidnapping and interference from her friends, she reluctantly agreed to join them. They knew of her struggles with Marvin and her inability to accept herself as a modern woman. They wanted to be there to support their friend in her time of need and restore her femininity. Cheryl was glad for the 3-hour drive to Dallas because it gave her time to take a break from the stresses of work and life in general. She shifted her thoughts to the young women she had gone to college with and how their lives were now. It would be interesting to hang out with these longtime friends. They had rented a corporate retreat building that had 6 master bedrooms, a kitchen, and a central meeting room with couches and cushioned chairs rather than tables and desks. The 6 bedrooms were separated so each person had their own room with a private bath. Outdoors was a patio and hot tub overlooking the golf course. Friday was planned as a travel day and meeting night. The plan was to make reservations for a sushi dinner, followed by a pajama party at the vacation home. Cheryl had taken the day off, so by 5 o'clock that evening she was on site. She realized by the laughter and squeals that most of the ladies were already in attendance. As she walked through the door, there was a wild cry of delight that she had finally arrived. Many of the girls had already started drinking, as evidenced by the large number of liquor bottles on the counter. The Uber ride to and from the sushi restaurant was raucous and disorganized, and all the women were laughing. Everyone was told to put on their pajamas and head to the center area. After a serving of margaritas from the kitchen blender, each woman had to talk about her career, children, marriage, and lovers. There were happy stories, sad stories, and stories without end. Cheryl was one of the 3 that had no denouement yet. Everyone saw the possibility of wonderful or terrible things happening to these 3 women. More than half of the women had been divorced at least once. Most of the people interviewed told Cheryl that she was on the right track. She should have taken the marriage into her own hands and told her husband how things would be. He should happily comply or just accept it. It's his choice, but it's best for him to make his wife happy and stop whining. The girls applauded Cheryl for pulling herself together and telling her ungrateful husband she was moving out for 6 months, and for being a strong modern woman. They loved the no-contact rule and the fact that she was living as a single woman, not bound by the constraints of a marital relationship. They ached when she told them that Marvin had filed for divorce and was using this opportunity to change his life for another woman. She told of his date with the young, beautiful Tara Wilson and how he traded in his Honda for a BMW convertible as a sign of seriousness. Even the most rebellious girls toned down their speeches about getting their husbands to work it out. Most of the women said that after their divorces, their ex-husbands married younger women and they married older men. All agreed that they needed to proceed with caution and not force him to make a choice she didn't want him to make. After a late night, the group didn't start their shopping trip until 11 a.m. The plan was to eat lunch and store until 4 p.m., then return to the retreat and rest for the rest of the afternoon and early evening. They had reservations at an Italian restaurant and planned to go clubbing afterward. Each woman was told to wear her best man-catcher dress and put $20 in a margarita blender, and the woman who caught the best man would win $240. The dinner was especially good, but the real excitement was the man-catcher contest. When they arrived at the best club, they found they couldn't set one table for 12 people and had to make do with 2 tables of 6. This also made the ladies more accessible for the men to ask them to dance. Cheryl enjoyed dancing with 5 different men. Each man was charming, pleasant, and fun. This was exactly what she had envisioned life to be like when she left Marvin's house. The 6th man who approached her was completely different. One glance at Cheryl made her squirm in her chair, and she got up to dance with him without even waiting for his invitation. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and very sophisticated. He spoke to her quietly and directly, oblivious to everything that was going on around him. After a few fast and slow songs, he asked if she was tired and wanted to come back. She replied, "I will return to the table if you will join me. Otherwise, I will stay here with my arms around you." He said, "That's the nicest music I've heard all evening. Your table looks rather noisy. Would you like to join me at my table? This is my son and a few of his friends from college. I'm sure we'll have time to talk since the boys are spending their time chasing young ladies tonight." She replied with a laugh, "Sounds like fun." Cheryl learned that Ted was an airline broker in Dallas to visit his son who was working there as a summer intern. His office was in Seattle, but he traveled all over the world selling new and used airplanes. Suddenly in her mind, everything fell into place. If she wanted an experience with a real stud, it would be Ted. She had a hard time finding men in her town who didn't know Marvin. Here was a man from Seattle and Dallas with a son, Matt, who had no contacts and didn't know Marvin. She wasn't even going to tell Ted her real name so he couldn't trace her. It was perfect. She could have fun with him and Marvin would never know the difference. Her husband had a saying about fouls in basketball: no harm, no foul. Since he wouldn't know she was having fun with Ted, there would be no harm and therefore no foul. Her table became the center of the party where young men and women stopped to sit, drink, laugh, and have fun. Now that Cheryl had decided how to have fun without her husband knowing, she relaxed and had a great time. He turned to his son and said, "Take a picture of this. I want to remember it forever." Ted said, "I think we need to move this somewhere else before we get arrested. But first I have 2 questions for you. The first question is, what's your name?" "CJ," she answered. "The second question is, are you married?" She replied, "Not anymore, my husband divorced me." She then asked, "Where are you staying?" He replied, "At the Embassy Suites about a mile away. I will ask my son to find another room for the night, as mine will be very busy." With those words, Cheryl grabbed Ted by the arm and dragged him towards her friends' tables. She announced, "Ted and I are leaving. I'll see you tomorrow morning when I pick up the money for catching people." She then made Ted show her friends his driver's license, so that if Ted turned out to be the axe murderer, the police would know who he was. All of Cheryl's fears about cheating on Marvin dissipated when, with her arms around Ted, she headed toward his hotel. As soon as the door was locked, she clung to Ted, and they walked to the bedroom. She led him backward to the padded chair by the bed, knelt down, and after the pre-breakfast entertainment, Ted took Cheryl to her friend's house. The jealous friends wanted details. After lunch, all the ladies began to go home to their husbands, lovers, or empty apartments. They all agreed that they would try to socialize more with the group. They were especially eager to hear about Cheryl's further adventures. Some envied her situation, others were thankful they were not in her shoes. Week 13. On Sunday afternoon, Marvin picked up Tara and Sean and drove them to his country club. After a late breakfast, he took Sean and Tara to show him the golf store, the golf course, the driving range, and the snack bar. Marvin had an old set of clubs that his son had used when he was that age, so Sean would keep them in the store for when he came to play. Most importantly, he gave Sean his club number so he could order sodas and fries for him and his new friends at the pool. The following Tuesday was the first in the Young Golfers Summer Program. Sean was smiling the whole time. He dreaded a boring summer, but golf lessons, playing golf and swimming 3 days a week made him a happy boy. It also made Tara a happy mother and a happy companion for Marvin. In the evening, she cooked dinner for the 3 of them. After Sean went to bed, she snuggled up to Marvin and said, "Thank you so much for bringing Sean to this golf group. He is really happy. I'm sure you've been a wonderful father to your children." He regretfully replied, "You'll have to ask someone else about that. After what has happened to me in the last 3 months, I have no idea if what I did was right or wrong. My world is so upside down, my head is just spinning." Tara hugged him and said, "I'm here for you. I've been through this before. After the fog comes clarity, I guarantee it. Just keep doing what you're doing. You'll feel better no matter what happens." They then spent some time in silence, hugging and talking. On June 15th, Marvin and Cheryl knew what day it was. It was their 25th anniversary. Both thought about sending each other a card, but decided against it. Both had 13 weeks marked on their calendars since Friday. This is the end of Cheryl's 6-month escapade of empowerment. It would be decision day, whether they would reunite as husband and wife or sign the final divorce decree. Cheryl was still reeling from her trip to Dallas. Her friends gave her strength and support in what she did and how she did it. The night spent with Ted had been impressive. However, she knew she had to keep all her hometown connections a secret. Otherwise, her absentee husband might bring the matter to a divorce, and she didn't want that right now. She didn't really want to divorce him. She just wanted things to be different. She wanted the freedom to do what she wanted, but to have him as her home to run to whenever she wanted. It was the perfect position. Of course, Marvin would be cuckolded. He just wouldn't know it. She hated being untruthful to her husband of 25 years. He just needed to stop making a big deal out of it. On Wednesday, Marvin played golf with Greta. Thanks to taking lessons from the club professional and Greta's helpful hints, he managed to lower his average score by 6 strokes. He really enjoyed her company, and being outdoors on a beautiful afternoon was special. While the golf game was serious, the conversations between them were easy as they became very personal with each other. And when they finished their round, he asked her if she would like to play with him Friday night at the couples club. He said, "It's mostly married couples, but you can get unmarried people too. Just 9 holes of golf, then dinner and prizes." She replied, "I'd love to." On Friday night, a longtime group of ladies gathered at the country club for drinks and dinner. Cheryl had been a member of this group for many years, but after Marvin's divorce, she was no longer eligible to attend the club. Her friend Betty asked if she could join them. She was reluctant at first, but decided that a modern woman would not cowardly be in the same building with her separated husband. After all, they weren't sworn enemies, just 2 people who had drifted apart for a short time. Their usual spot for a Friday night bachelorette party was on the patio above the 9th green. It was a place they had been assigned years ago because of the raucous and loud conversations this company was known for. It was a beautiful evening, and the Cosmopolitans never stopped drinking. Cheryl was glad to be back with her friends and looked around, remembering the times she and Marvin had spent here. And then she saw him, her husband. He was walking beside a moving golf cart toward his ball. He looked very good, trim, with an athletic gait. Judging by the location of the ball, they had already made 2 strokes on the par 5 hole. He swung his club, the ball flew straight at the pin and rolled into the cup. "Eagle! He made eagle!" heard Cheryl shout to the woman. She was overjoyed for her husband and jumped up to congratulate him, but stopped as her stomach clenched into a lump. A tall blonde woman jumped out of the cart and ran up to Marvin. "Man!" He turned to her and she wrapped her arms around him and gave him a quick kiss. They didn't care who was watching. They didn't hear the cheers and jeers of those around them. The 2 golfers embraced each other and headed for their cart. The ladies at the table gasped as they realized what Cheryl had seen. Cheryl grabbed her purse and ran to the car. There, she burst into tears. Another beautiful woman was following her Marvin. He had to wait for her decision on how soon she would return to their home. It should have been her decision, not his. He does want to trade with her, but it saddened her that she was the one who was to be traded. Week 14. Diane Marcos scheduled Cheryl and Marvin for a joint meeting with the mediator. They hadn't seen or spoken to each other since their lunch 5 weeks ago. Both of them pulled up to Diane's office at the same time. As he turned off his BMW, Cheryl complimented him on his beautiful car and asked, "Can you take me for a ride after our session is over?" Getting out of the car, he replied, "I'm sorry, but I have a golf game this afternoon. Besides, we're not supposed to have any contact with each other." She replied, I'm looking forward to our session today. I hope we can work out our differences and be a couple again. He grinned and said, Yes, me too. But with you moving, any reunion will become difficult. Diane welcomed them into her office. I'm so glad you're talking to each other. This is a good start to reconciliation. After our last meeting, I informed you that this would be a joint meeting. Each of you will be able to talk frankly with each other and find out what our common ground is. From our first meeting, I realized that you both care and love each other. You both want to stay married. The only stumbling block is that Cheryl wants to have experiences with men other than Marvin. This is a real problem for him, and he has vowed to finalize the divorce if Cheryl is unfaithful. Do we agree that this is our stumbling block? Both answered, Yes. Diane asked Cheryl if she wanted to talk first. Cheryl replied, Yes, I would like to start. Marvin, I really truly love and respect you. I want us to be together forever, however. I feel incomplete and lacking in world experience. From what I have read, I have learned that sexual interaction is different from intimacy. You can have an experience with someone without caring about them, or even loving them. It's just a physical act, just like a handshake or a hug. She continued, Intimacy is a different thing. If you have an intimate relationship with someone, you are deeply emotionally attached to them. It's a lifelong connection. You and I have an intimate relationship. I'm doing this with you because I care about you, and you care about me. Another way to describe your fear of a cuckold is that you've had the flu many times. It's a physical event. An event you didn't like, but you dealt with it. You moved on. You didn't ruminate and rage about it for the rest of your life. It wasn't pleasant, but you dealt with it. She continued, It's the same as if I had a short relationship with someone else. I feel like I need this contact to become more of a woman to you, not just a wife. I hope you understand where I'm going with this. Taking a deep breath, Marvin spoke. I thought it was interesting that you said you have the utmost respect for me as a husband and a man. But at the same time, you suggest that you are disrespecting me as a man by wanting to do it with other guys. It's demeaning to me, and I find it terribly offensive. Almost indignantly, he said, You're saying you'll get over it shows an ignorance of how men think. Since the beginning of time, it has been built into men's DNA that they don't want other men having fun with their female companion. It has to do with preserving the species and masculinity. You can go back thousands of years and see how men thought this way. He continued, There are two C words that are offensive to both men and women. Cheryl, I would like you to remain my wife, but I will not be part of your experience. He continued, I will not tolerate it, but your thoughts will be elsewhere, as will mine. Cheryl had no other answer but, No, Marvin, it won't be like that. I promise it won't be like that. He wasn't moved by her weak answer. Diane ended the session and asked them both to keep an open mind and think about possible compromises they could make. Week 15. Summer was in full swing, and Marvin played golf with Greta every Wednesday afternoon. Usually it was just the two of them playing, but sometimes clients would join them. Greta for insurance, Marvin for investments. After the game was over, Marvin would invite Greta to his house for a steak and salad dinner, to which she would happily agree. Sitting on the back patio after dinner, Marvin said, I need to bring you up to speed on how I feel about my marriage. We had a mandatory reconciliation meeting last week, and we are no closer to an agreement than we were when I filed. You already know the conditions I set then. He then said, I feel that you and I are very close to each other, so I can say that I like you very much and I want to keep our relationship. However, I have pledged not to have sexual intercourse with anyone until my marriage is dissolved. It would be hypocritical of me to divorce Cheryl for infidelity by having fun with you. I don't know if you want to do this with me or not, but I want you to know that this is why I didn't push to take our relationship to the next level. I hope I wasn't presumptuous in thinking you were interested in me at all. His comments caused Greta to laugh. You're not presumptuous at all. I really enjoy spending time together. Marvin, I feel like you're my best friend in this town, and I'm fine with the state we're in right now. It's important for you to live until the end of the summer to work things out with Cheryl before you change anything. The next day, Marvin asked Tara if she would go with him to an outdoor concert on Saturday night, and she agreed. Greta was in Atlanta one weekend with her LPGA friends. They rode around town in Marvin's BMW convertible because it was so much fun on a beautiful summer evening. I have to tell you, Marvin, you have made my son's life and mine just wonderful this summer. Sean loves the junior golf program. He's made some great friends, and I have a great friend in the form of you. You have been so much fun to be with this summer. I hope the summer never ends. He said, I'm afraid it will end with a big bang. Cheryl's Women's Empowerment Project ends on the last day of August, and we have to decide what we're going to do. Earlier this week, we had a reconciliation meeting with our psychologist. I gave my speech, she gave hers. Neither of us budged. This brings me to a topic that I hope I don't overstep. We've been close this summer, and I'm enjoying the two of us and the three of us together. He continues, by this time, the average couple is either getting into it or drifting away from each other. I intentionally don't do it with anyone during Cheryl's 6-month escapade. How can I divorce her for adultery if I'm having sex with someone else? That's why I've been celibate for the last 15 weeks. Laughing, Tara said, I'm so proud of you. I was worried that you'd go off the rails for revenge and it might ruin your life. I understand you because, as you know, I've been there once before. I suspected that's what you were doing. It will be interesting to see what happens to your life this fall. She asked, while we're on the subject, I want to ask if this no-sex rule applies to Greta as well? I don't want to sound pushy or possessive, but I know you spend a lot of time with her, and I don't want her to be treated as a Plan B woman. My ex-husband had a girlfriend, and it really hurt me when he chose her over me. I hope you understand my position. He took her hand and said, you don't have to worry about me waiting for you. Greta and I are great friends and enjoy our time together. About 90% of the time we spend together, we talk golf or business. She welcomes the no-sex rule as she does not want to get into a relationship with someone without having any idea where it will lead. Please don't worry, you are special to me, and I don't want to hurt you. Week 16. Week 17. Summer was getting closer and closer to fall. Marvin played golf with Greta every Wednesday and spent an evening with her every week. Marvin spent most of his time with Tara and also with her son Sean, which suited them both. Week 18. Greta did not participate in the country club tournament on the 4th of July because she went to Atlanta to play golf and see friends. Marvin invited Tara and Sean to come to the fireworks show at the golf course. Sean socialized with his golfing buddies, and they sat in lawn chairs, drinking drinks and enjoying the evening. Tara noticed him looking off in the distance, toward his house. She touched his arm and smiled as he turned to her. She nodded and he nodded back. No one had invited Cheryl out for the evening, so she drove to the country club and parked a block away to watch the fireworks. The cars parked on both sides of the street made it difficult for her to turn around and go back. She did not want to continue down this street since she used to live on it. She saw members walking down the street to their cars and homes. She also saw Marvin and Tara walking under the arm of a boy to where her house used to be. She didn't want to appear to be a stalker, so she sat and sniffled until the Johnsons went inside. Week 19. Twice a week, Cheryl went clubbing. She danced, laughed, drank Cosmopolitan, and had a great time. She maintained her dignity and could not be accused of having fun with any of her new friends. She enjoyed teasing and making men run after her. There was always the possibility that Marvin was being followed by an investigator who could document infidelity. She still didn't know how he knew about Roberto. Fortunately, they had only flirted with each other. She called Ted and asked him to call her when he was within range of her house. Ted said he would be in Dallas the following weekend. Cheryl asked to meet him halfway there, and he readily agreed. Cheryl still suspected that Marvin knew Roberto. She rented a car in case he installed a locator in her vehicle. She didn't use her favorite purse since it could have had a locator or recorder sewn into it. The call to Ted was not from her cell phone, but from a phone discarded at a Walmart store. Once again, she outsmarted Marvin. They were to meet at a bar near the hotel for a couple drinks before heading to their room. Ted toasted his friend's arrival with a drink of Macallan whiskey. After 2 drinks, they were ready to head to the hotel. She walked down the hallway, with a grinning Ted following her. Week 20. Robbie was working as a summer intern at a large factory in Nashville. The internship would end in 4 weeks, and the experience was very rewarding. The contacts he has made will be very helpful to him in finding a permanent job after graduation. Robbie has been socializing with a fellow intern named Matt. At the beginning of the summer, Matt and Robbie were assigned roommates for an orientation week internship at the company. After the internship, Matt was assigned to Dallas. This week, Matt was in Nashville for a meeting with company representatives and roomed with Robbie again. Matt's father was also in town and wanted to meet and take the 2 young men out to dinner. When Matt's father arrived, he introduced Robbie to Ted. They shook hands and headed to the steakhouse. After dinner, they had to decide where to spend the evening. Robbie and Matt wanted to go to a club to drink and dance. Even though Ted knew he would have to pay for it, he agreed to join them. After an hour at a club near the airport, Matt remarked to his father, "This club looks like a graveyard compared to the one you and I went to in Dallas." Ted replied, "That was a wild night." "What happened?" asked Robbie. Laughing, Matt replied, "Dad was almost assaulted at our table a couple months ago. A woman about Dad's age wanted him very badly. She took him back to the hotel. Didn't she, Dad?" "Matt, I think you need to show her a little more respect. She was a very nice person. I really enjoyed her company. She wasn't a slut or slutty. She was out with her friends for the 25th anniversary of their graduation. She was in the midst of a divorce and just wanted some male attention." There were too many similarities, and Robbie began to put the pieces of the puzzle swirling around in his head. "What was her name?" he asked. Ted replied with a puzzled look. "CJ, why?" Robbie thought, "Cheryl Johnson's initials. My mom was in Dallas for her 25th reunion 8 weeks ago. She and my dad will probably be finalizing their divorce in a month. Could you describe this woman to me?" Matt pulled out his cell phone and dialed the number on the picture of Cheryl and Ted kissing. He wanted to keep the other pictures out of Robbie's sight. He handed the phone to Robbie. 2 seconds later, Robbie recognized his mother kissing the man sitting in front of him. Out of habit, he ran his thumb over the next photo, just as Matt reached for his phone. Matt said, "I don't think that would be a good idea, Robbie." Robbie looked at him and said, "It's not for me. Dad needs to know what happened because they're either going to rebuild their marriage or get a final divorce. He needs to know." Matt pulled his hand away, and Robbie saw his mother's bare ass rubbing against Ted's lap at their table in the club. Ted immediately said, "Robbie, she told me she was divorced. I don't do that with married women. I was hurt badly twice when other men entertained my then wife. I won't do something so disrespectful to another man." Robbie shook his head in appreciation, turned to Matt, and asked him to forward the pictures to him. Robbie turned to Ted and said, "I should get going. Thanks for dinner and drinks. Goodbye." Week 21. Greta called Marvin and asked him to cook her a steak at his house after golf Wednesday afternoon. He gladly honored the request. After a great steak, red wine, and dessert, Greta asked him to sit next to her on the couch. It seemed to him like a budding breakup. Perhaps she had changed her mind after their conversation last week. Greta began to talk like this. "You know how much I enjoy your company. We've become very close, and I want to ask you something that I hope won't hurt our relationship." Marvin felt a lump in his throat. Cheryl's ghost was alive. "After spending 5 months with you, I have come to the conclusion that you are one of the most honest and intelligent people I have ever known. Your business practices are efficient, profitable, and you make every transaction a win-win for the client and your company. I admire what you have built. I also know that one day you will want to slow down and work less. Your children won't want to come back and run your company, and I'd hate to see a viable local company sold to a chain. For that reason, Marvin, I would like you to consider merging our companies. Our companies are very compatible and will complement each other. My company, compared to my peers, is at maximum market penetration, as is yours. If we team up, I will have access to a new client list and you will have access to my clients. By the time you're ready to retire, I can run the company and take your place as president. Then I can buy out your half and you can retire or work part-time. I know you have a big personal decision to make in a month, but I feel like I should broach the subject now before you make another decision that will affect your company. You don't have to make a decision now, it's just something you can think about. We spend a lot of time together, so we can work on it piece by piece until we come to a decision. Marvin brightened as he said, I was so afraid you were going to say you didn't want to be around me anymore. Instead of the expected pain, I got a wonderful offer. I really like your idea. I was hoping Robbie would come back and join the company, but after what he's been through this summer, he's standing firm on his decision to pursue an engineering degree. I can see how we can bring companies together. When we entertained joint clients this summer, I thought it was very rewarding. I'm very glad you brought it up, as I was very impressed with your business acumen and dedication. I would love to pass on the legacy of my family business to you someday. Week 22. After much agony, Robbie called Cindy to tell her about their mother's infidelity. He emailed her a picture of Cheryl kissing Ted for her to look at. Cindy replied, I don't think a kiss like that fits the description of infidelity. However, you do have Ted's admission that they had physical contact. Robbie then emailed her a picture of their mother with Ted. I didn't want to send you that disgusting photo. But between what Ted told me and this photo, there is no doubt what she was doing with him. Robbie had time to calm down from her outrage at her mother's act. The picture took Cindy by surprise, and she went on a rampage, calling her mother all sorts of foul words. In tears, she said, Can you imagine what this will do to Daddy? He devoted his life to that selfish whore, and look how she repaid him. It's horrible. How are we going to tell Daddy? I know, Robbie exclaimed. As the eldest, do you want to tell him? Or should I do it, since I've already talked to Ted? Let's do it together, she replied. We have to do it in person, not over the phone. He's going to need us. What's left of our family has to stick together. Week 23. Maywin was surprised when Cindy called to ask if she and Robbie could join him the following weekend. Maywin was excited that they would be coming to visit him. He missed them, as this summer was the first time Robbie had been away from home. The happiness was shattered when they told and showed him what Cheryl had been doing in Dallas while traveling with her girlfriends for her 25th birthday. Marvin's voice was measured and his face pale. He said softly, I thought it was going to happen, and I was dreading the day I would find out for sure. She was so excited about the experience that with my mind, I knew it was going to happen. But in my heart, I hoped it wouldn't happen. I didn't have an investigator follow up with her because I didn't really want to know, but deep down, I needed to. More than anything, I would hate for you two to see that picture. She was a good mother to you and a good wife to me. It's a shame she went off the rails. This is one example of how the saying, absence makes the heart grow more beautiful, is not true. The longer I live without her, the less I want her back. Having made the decision to divorce, Marvin wanted to spend the rest of the weekend enjoying their children. They purposely did not want to contact their mother because they did not want to see her. Their laughter was strained, but it was nice to see their father. They were proud that he wasn't a crying and whining man, but Marvin had more than 6 months to prepare for that. Weeks 24 and 25. Cheryl was getting ready to move in with Marvin. She packed clothes she knew she wouldn't wear for a while, such as a gauze sundress. She was sure that Marvin had no good reason to divorce her for infidelity. She was ready to leave her 6-month lifestyle experiment. She wanted to go back to Marvin's big, beautiful house, not the small apartment that was cramped for her. She missed her status as Mrs. Marvin Johnson in the city. She had forgotten how much fun it was to go to formal dinners in her new dress and sit at the head table. She missed the always fun 4th of July party at the country club. Her friends had drifted away, and she wasn't called to have coffee or lunch at the club as often anymore. Going to the club wasn't as exciting as she thought it would be. Sure, she danced and made out with a few potential suitors, but the sparks didn't fly. All these guys wanted was to entertain her, and not after a few dinner dates, but right this night. Right now, in the bathroom, in the parking lot, whatever. Yes, that's what she wanted, but the more she looked at the other divorced women being hit on at the club, the less she wanted to be like them. To her, Ted was different, exactly what she'd envisioned a lover to be. Maybe she could sneak out once every 3 or 4 months to spend a weekend with Ted. Marvin would be in the dark. Although she was confident in her prospects of reuniting with her husband, she found it odd that none of her children had called her in weeks. She would call them, but the calls would just stop. The same thing happened when she tried to call Ted. The call would simply drop. Her texts and emails went unanswered. The only calls she received were from men at the nightclub who only wanted one thing. She thought maybe she needed a new cell phone. Week 26. At Marvin's request, his attorney contacted Cheryl's attorney and asked that the parties meet at his office at 1 p.m. to make a final decision on the divorce. He demanded two things: a current STD report and that both Marvin and Cheryl sign the divorce papers at the beginning of the meeting. If the spouses decided to stay together, they would symbolically tear up the final divorce decree and get back together. The lawyer will place champagne and 4 glasses on the table. The outrage was quite rampant as Cheryl, as a regular tramp, was to be tested for STDs. She was disgusted to go to the clinic, where she knew some of the staff, to ask for this test to be done. She knew she was clean, or she really hoped she was. Cheryl spent a lot of time on makeup for this appointment. A new fancy dress was required. She couldn't wait to be Marvin's wife again, and she realized that she really missed him. She was the first to arrive at the lawyer's office, followed by her attorney. Marvin was the last to arrive, and placing a bright red envelope on the desk, apologized for being late. Cheryl's heart beat faster. She thought he had resurrected the trip to Paris, and they would spend their second honeymoon there. The exchange of STD reports had gone off without contagion. Cheryl breathed a sigh of relief. Both parties signed the final divorce decree, and then Marvin asked Cheryl if she had anything to say. She began. "It's been a long 6 months without the love of my life being with me. But with any adversity comes the ability to improve. These improvements are reflected in the fact that I am once again a more enlightened woman who is even more committed to my marriage than before. I would like to thank my loving and dedicated husband for giving me the opportunity to spread my wings and learn to fly. Marvin, you will never regret the gift you have given me, for I will demonstrate my faithful love for you for the rest of the days of my life." Now it was his turn, and he said, "Faith is trusting someone. All marriage vows speak of the faithfulness of both parties, because without trust, there is no love. That brings us to the initiation of this divorce petition and my desire that my wife and I remain faithful to each other. Over the past 6 months, I have spent time with several women. I have had no contact with anyone during that time. Cheryl, have you remained faithful to me?" Shocked by the formality of his comments, she replied, "Yes, I have remained faithful to you." Marvin made a grimace at her comment. Cheryl noticed his reaction and became concerned. He picked up the red envelope and pulled out a picture of her kissing Ted. He asked, "Have you been faithful?" She started to stammer and mumble something, then said, "It was just a kiss. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't unfaithful." He pulled out another vulgar picture. That's what fidelity is? She was so flustered that her lawyer advised her to keep quiet. But she said, "Where did you get this picture from? Were you following me? My dress was accidentally pulled up when I tripped and fell on a strange guy." He replied sternly, "This is the most disgusting situation I have ever been in. This picture was taken by a friend of one of our sons in Dallas. Our son found out about the picture when Matt and his father were laughing at the slut who jumped Ted at the club. They confirmed it was you by showing him the picture presented here. At this revelation, Cheryl's face turned pale and tears came to her eyes. Marvin roared. Imagine the pain of a son seeing his mother in a crowded club as she tried to pick up some guy to entertain her. Our son sat across the table from the man who made his father a cuckold and his mother a whore. Imagine what was going through his head looking at that disgusting picture. And you wonder why the kids don't return your calls. He turned to his attorney, handed him both signed copies of the order and said, "Please file them." Marvin, the sex meant nothing to me. It meant nothing to Ted. It was just a physical activity, no love, no commitment. He said sternly, "That's even more cruel, Cheryl. You think it with Ted means nothing to you, while you know it means the world to me. How disrespectful that is to me. That's the worst thing you could say to me." Cheryl collapsed into a puddle of tears, moaning and mumbling. She didn't have the strength to get up to leave, even when the lawyer pulled on her arm. She repeated, "No, no, no, I want to be your wife again. Please forgive me. I promise to be faithful always. Please don't do this to me. I don't want to be divorced like the other women in the clubs. Please don't push me away. I'm sorry. I'll never do this again." As he left the office, he could hear her crying and sobbing all the way to her BMW. Marvin took the rest of the day off. He went home as he felt it was dangerous for him to drive or even be around people. He poured a large glass of whiskey, lit a cigar, and turned on the Frank Sinatra channel on Sirius Radio. The view from his patio deck was quiet and serene, just what he needed. He looked at his turned-off cell phone and saw that Cheryl was calling him every 5 minutes and then deleted those calls. Tara and Greta called a few times, as well as Robbie and Cindy. All in good time, he thought. Secretly, he knew this was how it would end up. Cheryl wanted to do it so badly that it was inevitable. It was why she had to move all her possessions out when she left 6 months ago. He wanted her gone so he could get used to being without her. Her, the woman he loved, but had lost over time. Since last summer, he'd seen her resentment of their marriage grow. Whether she cheated or not, it didn't matter. She was gone. When he spent time with Tara and Greta, they showed more concern for him than Cheryl. They had exceeded the 25-year warranty on their marriage. Whether it was the scotch or the cigar or the fatigue or just relief or a combination of all of these things caused him to remain unconscious all afternoon and all evening. He awoke to Tara's light touch. She asked with a concerned look on her face, "Are you okay?" He smiled weakly and replied, "Yeah, but why wouldn't I be okay?" She laughed and said, "I see you haven't lost your sense of humor after the divorce." He replied, "It turned out just as I expected 6 months ago. She's gone. It was nice to just sit here in silence. I've been emotionally preparing for this day since she left. Without knowing the exact details, I knew what the outcome would be. I wasn't blindsided by it. I could at least make alternative plans for the future and not be a rudderless canoe for the next year." She sat down next to him, put her arm around his shoulders and asked, "Does that future include me?" When he quickly replied, "Absolutely," she brought her face to his and kissed him. Then she said, "As long as you have plans for me, I can wait. Don't be in a hurry or rush to do anything. You're feeling the last gasps of a 25-year relationship. It's not going to disappear quickly. I'll be there for you." Then she kissed him again and left. Cheryl was so confident that her husband would gladly welcome her back into his home that she had arranged to leave the apartment at the end of the 6-month lease. Now she needed to find a new place to live. Because the apartment building project was completed, the owners did not offer her a new apartment discount. Instead, they raised the rent by 40%, putting her in a difficult position. She didn't push for more money in the divorce because she knew Marvin would take her back. Besides, the house was a gift to him from his grandparents, and the company had passed to Marvin from his father before their marriage. The divorce papers were just for appearance's sake, so people wouldn't think he was a cuckold. Diana Marco testified that Cheryl didn't want to give up her right to do it with other men, forcing Marvin to divorce her. The judge upheld her right to do so and approved a settlement agreement unfavorable to Cheryl. True, she was allowed to keep her teacher's retirement account. Because she was fully employed and had no children, no alimony was awarded. This was not factored into her new budget, as she was to be at Marvin's house this week. She was to move to a cheaper place. Paying moving expenses again, and deposits too, would be very difficult. She would like to have a small house, but that would require yard work. Those were handled by her now ex-husband, and she didn't want to do those chores. She found a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood that was well within her budget. The thought of evening work terrified her. Not because of the danger or the inconvenience, but because of the humiliation of being a waitress and being forced to serve her former country club friends. Now her children answer her calls, but the bond between them and their mother has been undermined. It will take some time to fully recover. They both promised to visit her the next time they were in town. Autumn came, the trees turned different colors, the days became shorter and the nights cooler. Cheryl shuddered and thought, "This is going to be a long, cold winter." The next morning was Saturday, and Marvin slept late. He told his Saturday golf group that he would not play that day. Around 10 a.m., Greta appeared in the doorway. She said, "I heard it was brutal, but it's over." "Who told you that?" Greta smiled and replied, "We have the same lawyer, silly. He knows how close you and I are. Besides, I threatened to break all his golf clubs in his left arm if he didn't tell me." He laughed and hugged her. She asked, "Is it finally over?" "Yes, it's finally over." She said, "Good. Now, as you start making plans for the rest of your life, I want to tell you something. Something I wanted to tell you before, but you already had a lot on your mind, and I had so much fun with you that I just couldn't tell you. Please sit down with me." He hesitated, trying to imagine what she was going to say. In a soft voice, Greta said, "The ladies in town find you quite attractive, and as the final decree is finalized, you will be noticed by more and more women. Making plans for your life, you probably intend to remarry someday. If I were fortunate enough to be invited, I would answer you no, because I am already married." This made him jump to his feet. "What? When? How?" was all he could formulate in his mind. He asked, "Who is your husband, and where does he live?" "My wife lives in Atlanta. We've been married for 5 years. One of the reasons I travel there often is to see her. Marvin, I'm a lesbian, and have been for 10 years. That doesn't change the fact that I love you as my best friend and want you in my life always. I can love you but not marry you. As far as I'm concerned, we can continue to live the way we did this summer if Tara doesn't mind. In fact, I would like to improve my relationship with Tara. I want her to know that I'm not trying to steal her man. If she's important to you, then she's important to me. After all, we are business partners." She continued, "I was happy and relieved by the no-sex rule you instituted this summer. It didn't put me in an uncomfortable position. My wife doesn't want me doing it with you, just like you didn't want other men doing it with your wife. She doesn't like the idea of me being a cuckold. I have a great friend who just divorced his wife for doing it with another man." The end. If you haven't watched the first part of this video, the link will be in the description. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.